Oh, hey, it's the Moop.
The what?
The Moop. How else do you pronounce MAP?
Uh-huh.
Oh, let me add something.
Okay. I'm ready
Is it my
to actually
personality?
start the stream whenever.
Okay.
Um,
Give me one.
I can see
Oh.
us.
I started this. Wait, did I start the stream? God dang
You
it.
did.
Okay.
I can see us too, but I'm watching on Discord.
Okay. Uh, too late. Sorry.
it's late. Is that
Just,
what we're
just,
going with?
just so you know, we're streaming.
We're streaming. Okay.
I
Well, that is a heck of a way to
don't know
start
how that
things, of
happened,
course.
but it's happening. So
You can see clearly
Oh,
the rain is gone.
yeah.
well. Hi. um, we've
Oh,
got quite the first night going, but I think that's to be expected. Um, welcome to our stream. We are Ink and Blade, and we are going to be bringing you a few different games actually over stream and also through podcasts and a few other mediums. So we're looking forward to having you all come in and get to know us and enjoy our games along with us. Um, my name is Autumn, and I'm going to be the storyteller for the game which brings us here tonight, which is one of the Pathfinder adventure paths, Hell's Rebels. It's an exciting and action-packed game that is based around um, some ongoing acts of sedition in a increasingly authoritarians ruled city. And, our players are going to be coming together here. Little known to them at the moment, well, our players' characters, to possibly even incite revolution. But in the meantime, there is a lot to unpack and share about a little bit of background. And so I would like to go around and continue to introduce the players. If anyone feels ready to go with and want to start the introductions, feel free to step on up. Otherwise, I can give a little bit of introduction about myself first, if that's easier.
It makes a lot of sense for you to start off, I think.
Okay.
And then we can jump in.
Okay. So my name is Autumn. I have been playing and running tabletop games for longer than I care to admit at this point. But yeah, pretty much. So if it gives you a little bit more of an idea, I've been close with the industry for a while. I've used to work with a few gaming companies, especially back in the early 2000s, to demo games at and run their booths. I also did some writing and even had some included in some books that unfortunately were canceled just prior to production because of a company who shall go nameless starting their second edition. So, very excited in recent years to get back into not only running some games for everybody and getting to play in others, but also beginning to look into getting involved in the industry itself again, and hoping that coming together and starting Ink and Blade is a way for all of us to kind of look into dreams like that ourselves. So I'm going to pass it along. Anybody else ready to introduce themselves?
Yeah. I can go. Um, I'm Emily. Autumn is my mom. I'll be playing Ness in this campaign. But a bit about me. I've been playing games for most of my life, but I've only gotten really seriously into them in the past couple years. And I don't know. I've always been a creative person. This is a great outlet, and I'm really excited to be streaming and working with everybody.
All right. I'm Chris. I will be playing Goro Malamaxa in this adventure path. Full disclosure, I forgot that Gorum was the name of a god of the Pathfinder Pantheon until well after I had named the characters, so just roll with it. I have been playing, I just now realized, tabletop role-playing games for almost 20 years. Yeah, I was 12 years old the first time I played a tabletop role-playing game, and I am now 30, so my brain's broken a little bit right now. But that's okay.
Welcome to the club.
Yeah. Love tabletop role-playing games. Big fans of Autumn and Emily, and so when they invited me to another game, I jumped at the chance to promote communism and hit people with a hammer.
That's what else would you ever need?
What is best in life?
Hitting people with things other than hammers. That part's interchangeable. The particular
Sure.
implement of violence.
There's also sickles.
Mm-hmm.
Or size.
Yeah, but those are less communist, so
Well,
it depends on how red they get.
it's true.
Hello, I am Krista. I'm going to be playing Darwin. And I have been playing RPGs for about 6 years now, and very quickly got into running them myself and diving into adventure books, but also coming up with my own homebrew stuff. I have a long-standing experience of being in the performance realm, and so finding TTRPGs was like, oh, perfect. Like I needed a new outlet. And this is my second time now being a part of a game or really being part of a group that streams online, and that my previous group stopped, so I'm happy that I found a new group that wants to do it again. And yeah, that's all I got.
So we are short one of our players this evening. Something came up, as tends to happen with life, especially when you're trying to get the first night underway. But her name is Julia. She will be joining us. If she can make it still tonight, she'll jump on at some point. But likely we will just be able to bring her into the fold next week and see what seditious elements she brings to the table.
Yes.
So, to give you a little bit of some background to this game, we are playing a Pathfinder game. For those of you, I imagine if you're here, there's a very good chance that you know what Pathfinder is. But if not, I'm quite sure you know what Dungeons and Dragons is. So, without oversimplifying things, the two systems are very closely related, have a common origin, and I'm sure that there'll be some fun videos that we can share through Ink and Blade or some of the other parts of the family about that history, and it's a very fun story.
Yeah.
But the important thing to know for here is that the rules, it is the D20 system. We're playing the first edition of Pathfinder for this game, so it's very close to those who are familiar with third edition, particularly 3.5 of Dungeons and Dragons, it's going to seem very familiar.
Yeah, it's
ISO, the company. Oh, go ahead,
you can
please.
also think of it like 5th edition, but with more rules.
Crunchier.
Yeah, but the especially once you start to get into like mid levels, the turn flow feels a lot like 5th edition with the 3 different actions that you can take and stuff.
So, I guess I should just say that our game is going to probably be a little bit more roleplay heavy and rules light. To the point that we may issue or just modifying, brush over whatever we need to do with the rules for the sake of the story. So if you are wondering why something sounds like, wait a minute, that's not exactly how it works in this system, we are taking liberties. It's, very libertine group here. So that said, we'll still be doing more rolls and utilize turning to the dice a little bit more often than, say, in some of our other games, like the Thom game, which I hope you get to check out as well, which is notorious for sometimes going entire sessions without actually needing to roll.
I think her current record is like 2.5 or 3 sessions.
Probably.
But that's a different system and a bit of a different vibe.
Yes. But I do want to stress that this is going to be roleplay heavy. We're going to have a lot of deep backstory that we're going to bring to this table, a lot of heavy interactions with NPC and between the players, and we're going to spend time on it. So just to kind of give you some expectations. Paizo, the company that makes Pathfinder, they do a very good job within Pathfinder of creating entire campaigns. And while I usually like to make my own, I find that these are very handy if you are under a time crunch, or if you just prefer to have some things set out for you. They're very well developed, great artwork, great stories, lots of chances to really build on elements and customize it to your characters. In creating the backstories for our characters, completely organically, every one of them has managed to find a way to have elements of the backstory that just blended perfectly into the story already set out in these books. So we seized on it and kept going.
We're just too good.
That said, oh, go ahead. Sorry. Okay, so to give you a little bit of backstory here, and I don't want to dwell on, we're not going to sit here and talk about the history of Galarian, and which is the world that this is set in, or go over the long history of how these nations came to be that we're going to be talking about. We'll have chances to look into that history, either other videos or characters can bring it up and they do various knowledge checks and things. The important thing to know here is that this basic entire campaign is going to be based around a city of Cantargo. It is really its own character in this story. It is an old city built upon old cities. It has only recently been folded into the larger empire of Cheliax, which is a very, I hate alignments, but think it's very lawful evil. They literally worship Asmodeus, who is the reigning prince of hell.
Praise.
So yes, exactly. And it's written into the very charters and contracts and treaties. There is a lot of devil worship, and it's something that dominates the politics and the religion of Chaliax at this point, and it is quickly being imposed upon Cantargo. But the thing about Cantargo is, as I mentioned, it's old and it has a memory. And although Chaliax is doing its best to suppress that memory, it has a fierce independent streak. And it would not take much more suffocation and oppression to really start quite a fire of rebellion here. And we're, as the story opens, we're going to start seeing early elements of that. Another thing that's important to know is a little bit of recent history. There's a group that, for a very long time in Cantargo, helped fight off a number of invasions, not just Cheliax, from inside and without the city. And they were known as the Silver Ravens. Your chaotic good group of motley group of rebellion, rebels, and like I want to call them your classic do-gooders in a sense. They were, but they refused to kind of give up on independence, and they were very quickly became folk heroes. Unfortunately, Cheliax did overcome them in the end, and despite recent attempts to try to revive different rebel organizations within the city, their very memories being just stripped from the records and from the public mind. Still, there are echoes of their exploits and a few remnants of their extended network that longs to see their return. More recently, the Lord Mayor seemed to just abandon the city one day. At least that's what a lot of people have said. It could just be a mysterious disappearance, or what other people have said. What we do know is that a little over a week ago, the Cheliax Empire sent along the official replacement, a member of the ruling House of Thrune, Barzillai Thrune, who wasted absolutely no time in issuing a number of edicts that greatly disturbed the city.
Honestly,
in addition,
Barzillai just sounds like a punchable name.
It really does.
Just...
And we'll see, but I have a feeling he lives up to it.
You would.
So, yeah, you will probably soon too. So I'm going to share those edicts with you shortly to give you some idea. But I did want to leave off with one other bit of recent history that's going to play a very important part in the opening of our game, and that is an event that has become known as the Night of Ashes. Shortly after Barzillai Thrune took control of the city, a number of well-known, well-loved locations burned down on the same night. And an even larger number of well-known public figures either are assumed to have been lost in these fires or mysteriously disappeared. It was a very sudden and widespread blow to many of the groups that still strived for Cantargo's independence. And it has left quite a few people reeling in the ashes. So the echoes of that event are going to play out, not only, I think, in the story that's going to unfold, but even in the very lives of many of our characters, players' characters. Speaking of which, I would like to take a minute, go around, and let each of our players introduce their characters a little bit more. Whatever you feel comfortable sharing up front. I know many of you have some motivations that are personal and are very likely to come out when we actually have a chance to roleplay it. But general information, little bits of important history that might help us get a feel for your character as we open up our first evening. Do we have any takers on who'd like to go first?
I can go first. Is this just kind of like if somebody like what like my reputation might be, like that kind of background information?
Reputation's a great way to think about it.
Okay.
What would other people know about you? And if there's anything that you feel is also important to share now, feel free to.
Okay. So Darlin is known formally Lady Daphne Serini. She is the only daughter and the youngest of the Serini house, which is one of the few houses that are publicly supporters of Thrune and his taking of the Lord Mayor's seat. Her family is known for doing things such as theater of the real and macabre performances. And her mother is a countess and has a seat on the court of coin, which is where all the nobles, chit chat. And she goes by Darlin pretty much with everybody. And that's partially because she is a performer. So she would be recognized as somebody that does two main things. She plays the violin, and then she also is a dancer, and she has created her own style of fire dancing that typically gets requested to be at special events, whether they be something high society or something more for the public. And I think as far as reputation, that's probably like the basic things that her name would be like, that's who that is.
All right, so Gorham is also a member of Cantargo nobility, coming from a different house, the Alamaxa house. His youth and growing up is a little bit different than Darlin's. So, unlike the vast majority of the nobility in Cantargo, Gorham is a gnome. His birth mother was a servant of the Alamaxas who died in childbirth, and so the family adopted Gorham when he was born. So, even though he is a young adult by gnomish standards, his contemporary siblings would be the elder statesmen of the house at this point. The current leader of the house, Eladana Alamaxa, was technically a younger sister, even though she became the head of the house because she matured at the age of 20 and Gorham matured at the age of 40. So just that difference in timeline. Most people know that Gorham disappeared for a few years, and then came back to the city about 2 years ago. And outside of the family, not a whole lot of people know where he was and why he was gone. But his demeanor noticeably changed. He became, he was always a little bit of a gnome, like a goofball, right? Some of those classic gnomish traits, but he became a little bit more serious since being back and a little bit more planning. His house and his family are decidedly for Cantargo and whatever's best for Cantargo. They don't really care if that's supporting the Thrones or supporting the rebellion. What they care about is what is best for the family and is best for the city. Whereas Gorham himself is a little bit more rebellious in spirit and more, against devil worship. That seems to be a reasonable position in his mind. As far as characters, it's funny to watch Gorham walk down the street because he's about 3 feet tall, but he's dressed in immaculate breastplate with a by his standards, a massive hammer on his back, and is a well-known orator and performer. There are few in Cantargo who are better storytellers than a slightly inebriated Gorham. Essentially, imagine Tyrion Lannister, but less interest in women of the night and more interest in hitting devils with hammers. And kind of the same sort of common sense sort of block, right? He's smart, he's very charismatic, he's good at talking to people, but there could be some obvious logical fallacies to some of his points when he gets a little bit too into the weeds.
So you could say he speaks loudly and carries a big stick.
Correct.
Yeah, I
He's
got
like
you.
a 3-foot-tall Teddy Roosevelt.
This is exciting.
Okay. So most people would have no clue who Ness is. She she's very large, albino lizard folk, and she could be called royalty. Supposedly, she is the daughter of the chiefs of her village, the chief shamans and leaders of her lizard folk village. And the most striking thing you would notice about her, other than her albinism and the fact that she's nearly 7 feet tall, is she wears a suit of what looks like full plate armor, but upon closer inspection seems to be made of bone instead of metal, which only really adds to her intimidating aura. But because she's from very far out of town, she wouldn't be easily recognizable, but she's still easily recognized in a crowd.
Already imagining Darlin seeing you for the first time and being like, wow. She's like, I guess she's not small, so no. She's like 5'2",
Gorham would definitely consider asking to ride you, and then being offended that you were offended that he asked.
Like, I weigh like a backpack. You should be fine.
Yeah.
Why would I be offended? That sounds great.
Okay.
Oh no!
Even better.
I can just yeet you into battle.
Why?
Did we just fast
telling some
special
sort of tale
on
about
episode 1?
the glory of Cantargo, making us both stronger and healthier and easier to hit.
We did
How
fastball
tall is
special,
Gorham?
which is great because I'm the one with the claws.
Oh, sorry, Krista. Go ahead.
How tall is Gorham?
3 foot 2 inches.
Perfect. So every 2 feet is another person. Such a difference.
We'll have to find. We'll have to find out where Julia's character fits in all this at some point. But for
They're
now,
9 feet tall.
Probably about the same height as Darwin, if I were to hazard a guess.
If we find a big enough trench coat, we could all pretend to be a giant to get a ticket for a giant R-rated movie.
That's right.
oh my god,
Go do business.
Beard and a tail.
We're adult men.
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah. Like, get
It's
a
an adult.
exactly get a broom for a hand.
Yep. I have to go do this.
Business
Okay.
to do.
As you can probably tell, we are gonna have some really fun antics with this group, and I cannot wait to get them together. But there are a couple orders of business to finish introducing before we can do that. So the first is to give you a little more specifics about these edicts that have been issued in the last week since Barzillai took power. They are well, it's probably best if I just read them, and you can see how, in some ways bizarre and in other ways draconian, they come across. Proclamation the First.
Wait, we have to deal with dragons now? Nobody told me there would be dragons.
Yeah,
There are
no
dragons
spoilers.
after
There'll be no spoilers here. Proclamation the First. All slayers of city pests, hereby defined as doves, mice, and ravens, who present said pests to the Datari shall be rewarded with a bounty of 1 copper piece. Now, local... Go ahead, sorry.
Does this include ravens that happen to be silver?
They might be worth a little bit more than 1 copper piece. But sure. Having said that, it's important to note that, especially our local players, though honestly, if you spend any time in the city, you will quickly know that the Datari are basically the equivalent of the city guard. Proclamation the Second. All places of public business must display in a position of prominence within the first room accessible from the building's primary entrance a portrait of Her Infernal Magistrix, Queen Abigail II. Said portrait must measure no less than 11 by 17 inches. Proclamation the Third. Anyone who captures, alive and unharmed, a feral dog of a weight exceeding 50 pounds is to be rewarded with a payment of 2 silver pieces upon transfer of the dog to the Datari. Such noble guardian creatures should find homes worthy of their kind. Proclamation the Fourth. The right to wear fine embroidered clothing in public is hereafter prescribed to anyone other than agents of House Thrune or the Holy Church of Asmodeus. Exceptions can be awarded or purchased at the city's discretion. Very popular one, that one.
It ruined my day.
Ruined it. Proclamation the Fifth. Grain is life. Should grain be spilled in public, it must be gathered, cleaned, and repackaged within the hour. Any person who allows grain to go ungathered after a spillage shall be fined 1 copper piece per grain. Proclamation the Sixth. The imbibing of night tea brings a dangerous imbalance to the slumbering mind. Between the hours of sunset and sunrise, the taking of tea is proscribed. Anyone caught drinking tea after curfew is fined 10 gold pieces. And failure to pay this fine will result in incarceration. Well, let me read this last one. Proclamation the 7th. The odor and flavor of mint is an abomination to the refined palate. Be not the Cretan. Mint used in candies, drinks, and all manner of confections is hereby proscribed. Being caught with mint candies, confections, or drinks incurs a 20 gold piece fine, and failure to pay will also result in incarceration.
So to clarify, I can still use mint as a substitute for dill in my tzatziki, but I can't make a mint cake? Because that's not a confection, that's a sauce. It's also not a beverage.
Technically, yes. If it's not a beverage or a confection of some type, mint consumed and used in other forms is not illegal.
Okay.
It's also worth noting that I kind of glossed over the part where failure for businesses to display the portrait of her infernal magistrix Queen Abigail II will result in a fine of 10 gold pieces, and that for each week it is not redressed, it will increase another 20 gold pieces. And if it's not rectified within a month, the business will be seized by the government.
Said nothing about doodling a bunch on that portrait. So, you know.
It's true, there are a lot of oversights that a mischievous mind could exploit.
I think Ness just found a loop-shaped hole. That's all I know.
we shall see.
The name of the guards again. Could you say it one more time for me?
The Dottari. That's Dottari.
It's
I'm sure they
the
would
thing
love
where
for
it's
you.
the same forwards and backwards.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So
I'm like looking at it, reading it backwards. I'm like, what?
as you can imagine,
The first rule of being a Tatari is the first rule of being a Tassari.
That's not the same forwards and backwards. That's when the thing is self-referential.
I clearly misdiagnosed the definition of a tautology.
Big words won't save you now.
You see, this is the exact thing I'm talking about with Gorum. No common sense, smarter than he probably should be, really good at talking people into what's right, what he wants them to do.
well, good. You're going to need that. So, as you can imagine, these proclamations and just the direct imposing rule of House Thrune upon the city, including an influx of Hell Knights and from outside of the city, and a number of other officials being appointed from outside the city, has left a really upsetting taste for many of the locals, both noble and, well, I suppose they would say lesser. Now, it's shaking there. Having said that, what's maybe left a darker impression and perhaps stirred even more unrest has been the echoes from the Night of Ashes. The proclamations are things that people chafe under, but to lose long-standing friends and familiar places that have stood the test of time and that were in many ways local watering holes or cherished either, monuments or places where people would find respite from, their it's oftentimes hard life still, even here in Catargo. It's definitely been a stressful thing, and it's caused unrest to the point where a number of protests have begun to rise up across the city. With Barzilai recently just making the decision that he would live in and make his headquarters not any of the government buildings or even the Church of Asmodeus, but the Opera House, a cherished, beloved, culturally revered icon of the city. These protests have suddenly started to swell. So, word has spread over the last few days that perhaps the largest protest yet has been planned in the square outside of the Opera House, the Aria Park. And it is here that our characters find themselves. They have their own reasons. Some of them may be curious to see if they can get in touch with people who, may have gone underground or have disappeared. Others may be just trying to find a common interest amongst those who are also discontented with the recent turn of events. Others may be meeting contacts, but each have their own reasons, which will be up to them to explore and reveal. But it's worth noting that as our players are as our characters arrive, not only is there a larger crowd than expected, but there are quite a few Datari quickly showing up to sort of try to create a bit of a buffer between the crowd and the Opera House. So, let's go ahead and, if I can remind my mouse that it is awake. Here we go. We're going to move on over to the Aria Park map. What you'll see here is very much a public square and kind of maintained park. There's the fountain, of course. And at the top of the map, you'll see basically part of the Opera House. There's a large crowd here. In the interest of not cluttering the map too much, when it becomes useful, I'm just going to add in various NPCs or, and our players are free to add themselves to the map at any point, but it may not be necessary quite at first. I do want to start to go around to each of you and kind of get a feel for what it is that you're doing here. If you're going to, if there's other people you're here with or other people you're here meeting, or if there's just some answers you're trying to find, what you might be doing to get those answers. Let's go ahead and Well, I should. Is anyone wanting to start?
Not particularly, but I can.
Fair.
I can go if other people are a bit reluctant or would rather wait.
Sure, if you're ready to go, what brings you here? What are you looking for?
Well, Ness is looking for someone who might know something about the what happened to the Milani worshippers in the area. Milani being, the goddess of revolution and freedom, and were they involved with the Silver Ravens, or did they have sort of their own group? I don't remember.
No, that's a great question. So, coming from the outside, and in a lot of ways from different cells, Balani worshippers are all about resistance, revolution, and they tend to, rather than large congregations and big churches and with a communal worshiping, they work in a lot of ways like cells, rebel cells, and you are here trying to make contact with what would have been the local cell, which was known as the Rose of Cantargo.
Okay,
Now, this cell, whether it was a single person and some hand-picked supporters, or if it was a group of agents working in tandem, that's one of the things that the Church of Milani is very careful about, insulating between groups. And just enough information to be able to communicate and to provide support, not enough to know who is doing what. So, it makes it a little trickier. You do know that the Rose of Cantargo has operated here for a while and did play quite a role in trying to prevent Cheliax and the House of Throne from taking control of the city. And that they were quite prolific in those efforts, really. But they have gone silent. And these are dangerous times to be an open worshiper and supporter of Milani and her causes of freedom. So it may be tricky to find them. But in answer to your question, what you would know from your own network and those who have kind of given what information they can to help you on your mission is that there were members, supporters and worshippers of Milani that were part of the original group of Silver Ravens, including a cleric of Milani, but that it is known and believed that she's been dead for some time, and that whoever was kind of acting as remnants of the Silver Raven group were lesser known figures. The leaders have been gone for some time, one way or another. So it is a different group. And while they may provide needs and they may be very closely related, the Rose of Cantargo is its own thing, and it has been active much more recently than the Silver Ravens, and it has gone silent since the Night of Ashes.
Okay. Yeah, that was mostly what I remembered. Um, I don't know how much of that Ness would know, like about it going silent, but yeah, I mean, if she would, that was probably why she was sent here. Either way, she's here to meet a contact that, according to the people higher up in her cell, said that they said that this contact would have some information about what's going on with Milani in this area and some mission or task for her, hopefully.
Well, you do arrive here to quite a large crowd, and while you were probably hoping that you had enough information to really be able to pinpoint um, who this contact would be, it's not someone that you've met before. So you're looking for certain signs, sort of coded messages, like the use of a rose, perhaps, in attire or some type of accessory, or some other symbols of Milani that would be obvious to a worshiper and less so to someone else. And I think coming here to, especially maybe even having been in town long enough to know any other protests, you were not expecting the size of this crowd. It might prove a challenge to find this contact, but if you wanted to spend some time either mingling, or if you were trying to find some place, like a vantage place, to be able to see if you can find some telltale signs of your contact, or even if you just wanted to try to gather some information from the crowd, there's lots of options.
I think I would mostly like to look around rather than trying to talk to people because, first of all, people confuse me and I never get the reaction I expect from them. And second of all, I have fairly decent senses, so I'm more likely to lean on those than try to have a discussion with people, especially when it seems like there's a lot of tension and I don't want to get in the middle of anything just
yet. Okay. I'm gonna have you make a check for me in a minute. But for the moment, let's move along our circle and see if we can find out what our other players are up to. Either of you feel ready to jump in, or?
Sure. So Gorham had been taking sort of a hands-off approach to the rebellion. Like, he was in full support of it, but was mostly, a coin here, a well-placed word there. Working with some of his friends in House Victicora. But after the Night of Ashes, when the house was destroyed, he felt it was now time to take a more hammer-on approach to the rebellion. And so part of why he's coming to this protest is he's hoping to see if any of the surviving members of House Victicora show up, right? Because he's having a hard time finding them and organizing with them, and he figured it wouldn't surprise him if some of them are hiding in this crowd, right? Trying to egg it on or rile it up. And so he's arriving with a couple of servants of House Alamaxa because his dear little sister won't let him leave the house by himself anymore. She's so cute. And so one of the servants is one of his well-known friends, Chili. And Chili showed up in Cantargo when Gorham came back, and is not a native of Cantargo, but another is a long-term. servant of the house who Gorham at some point probably learned his name, but then it wasn't important to the next few steps of the conversation and forgot it. Whereas Chile is a close compatriot, and so he remembers his name. And so he's not being subtle, but he's also not being obvious. He's just kind of, it's Gorham as an individual in the city sort of stands out like a sore thumb, but also blends into the crowd at the same time, because he's short, and so that makes it easier to blend into the crowd. But he's also gnomish nobility, and is the only gnomish nobility in the entire city, so he sticks out like a sore thumb in that regard. So he's in the crowd, kind of like subtly trying to see if he can find any of his compatriots from the house destroyed in the Night of Ash.
Okay. How would you, very roughly loose ideas, or if you have a very specific one, that's great too, but how would you describe Chile and like the role that they play as like a companion?
Chile is like Chile is Gorham's conscience. Chile is the one that reminds Gorham that just because it is the thing that maximizes the utilitarian outcome of an action doesn't necessarily mean it's the right thing to do. Right? So as an abstract example, Gorham would find it 100% okay to sacrifice 500 fighting men to overthrow the city in order to rescue their families and everyone else that lives in the city. Chile would remind him that that might not necessarily be the smartest tact, nor the most ethical. And it would take Chile to say something like that to kind of like, oh yeah, I guess that's right. Because the tactical plan made the most sense, and it freed all the families, right? So obviously this works. And, never mind the fact that 500 people died who didn't necessarily need to die, right?
Yeah.
While also being a fine combatant on his own.
Does Chile also tell Gorham that Gorham's bright red cowboy boots look good on him?
No.
I see.
Because Gorham isn't that dumb to buy bright red cowboy boots. I'm also just now realizing that I basically named my moral and ethical conscience after TD from The Good Place, but I have a habit of doing that, and so...
It's amazing, and I love it, and please don't change.
Communist Eggman and his second in command, Chidi Anagonye.
Correct.
Okay. So really it's more of just kind of taking the temperature of the crowd and trying to get involved.
Trying to figure out who's trying to hide themselves the most, right? And trying to play down and really hide in the crowd, the covering their faces, things like that, to see if he can maybe figure out if any of his friends happen to be there. His friends who are missing.
Right. Particularly hoping to see someone from House Victor, which was one of the most stunning victims' losses of the Night of Ashes. Mm-hmm. It's one thing, long-standing and cherished businesses went up in flames, and while surprising and shocking, it just wasn't on the level of a long-standing grand house and good regard of within the over the city and the work that they did with the city, up in flames and all of its members unaccounted for. Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, I will come back to have you make a check here soon as well. But let's move on to our last present party member and get a feel for what she's doing here.
If I can, I didn't actually describe what she looked like before.
Yes, please.
So she's a human. She's a young woman, petite. You mentioned she was short. She's very lean. She has very pale skin, but like big, bright green eyes that are very well framed by a full face of makeup, big cat, like eyeliner, dark red lips. And she has these like red, not like a ginger red, but like actually like bright red, long, wavy hair. And she wears very dark fitted clothing that since this proclamation she now wears very plain clothing but heavily draped in like all this different kind of jewelry.
Okay.
And that is her form of working around it.
I love it. I'm here for it.
And specifically today she's wearing a like fur lined black cloak that she has up because she's kind of like covering herself a little bit. She doesn't want to be immediately recognizable while she's here. But trailing behind her, she is holding the hand of her brother, who looks very similar to her. They might or might not be twins. And she's kind of like holding his hand as she's kind of like elbowing her way through the crowd. And her motivations for being here today were more of staying up on current events. She's been slowly collecting information about what happened on the Night of Ashes, and she figured that this would be a good place to kind of hear some more stories, also hear about like, is this a real revolution? What are the people saying here? She doesn't typically mingle with the common folk. So this is kind of her first time since that night really going out. And she looks back at her brother and says, "Look, I told Mom that we were going to go out shopping for more jewelry or clothes or something. You don't have to worry about it."
Okay. So, would you say that you're trying to stay, just give me a little better feel for it, on the back of the crowd, or are you trying to kind of blend into the middle of it?
I would say her initial instinct would be to get right into the middle of it. But if she's able to see that the Dotari are starting to gather around, um, that would be when she would start trying to like get back towards the edge. She very much does not want to get caught here, caught in the middle of anything.
Okay.
Probably right now is when like she would notice that they're gathering around and she's in the heart of this crowd.
Yeah, that's there had been a few Datari always on patrol at the park and the Opera House, but they have definitely started to come out in number now that they've seen this, how much this protest has swelled up. But having said that, it would not, despite the crowd, it would not be hard to start to move back out of it a bit, and probably, I suspect that you would find that that Logan's already trying to pull back a bit himself. You know, it's kind of the you know, putting on a that outward brave, I don't know if brave is the right word, but confident face, I think. You know, that well, any performer would try to use to project some type of confidence over the anxiety that must be coming from seeing that the party's starting to spread out like this and the crowd swell. But you've known your brother long enough to know that most of these things are kind of an act on his part, and that his performances in general are very much a way of projecting. But yeah, he will basically respond, I mean, at this point, I'd rather be shopping. I mean, I know that you like to slum it a bit, but I mean, this is starting to look like the rabble of the city.
Yes, I wasn't expecting it to be this well attended. But perhaps we won't go home with empty bags. Stop with the devil's threats.
Are you sure you're going to be welcome there anytime soon? I'm still the matter of the front window.
Oh, yes, it's now my favorite place.
So mercurial. Still, he looks around a little bit uncomfortably. You know, I'd love to put on a show, but could we maybe do it elsewhere?
Yes, perhaps on the other side of the river would be a little better for us. Maybe by the academy or something.
You know, we've come out and, you know, shown our faces. It should be enough, right?
Yes, if you could use your size to help, and I just start like pushing him in front of me.
Yeah, you can tell he is very uncomfortable with it, but also not quite sure how to get out of it. As you kind of use him as a shield to part the crowd and start to pull back from the center.
Let me just thank you again for being my escort. That's my riot shield.
To add it to the list of many things you owe me, sister.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Very
So let's jump back to our inconspicuous friend Ness. You were looking for some signs of a contact in the crowd, or possibly just even other people who may be aligned with Lonnie that might help you meet, meet your contact. Go ahead. We'll start making use of these so-called skills that we have. Go ahead and give me a perception check. Let's see if you uncover anything.
That's a nat 20 for a total of 22.
Ooh.
That'll be big.
So sidebar. There's a game that we play with several of the people at this table, where I made the mistake of just tossing out a generous perception check just to try and give a little bit of information that has perhaps one of the most notorious critical successes on a skill check of all time, as I completely had to rewrite that book. What's that?
that broke the game in half. You mean?
That broke the game in half. I'm refusing to allow this to break the record on that, but I will gladly provide you with some information that otherwise would have been incredibly difficult to obtain. It's just that crowds of city folk mingling like this are so uncomfortably unfamiliar to Ness that
Not to mention stinky. There's the mammals have a bit of an odor about them.
yes.
Mammals who live in densely packed cities even worse.
Okay. Hi. Okay. Do we need to we weren't sure if we were going to have you still here tonight while we were going. This is a good chance to maybe jump in with some things. We have just gotten underway with throwing our characters into the opening scene. So I'm gonna finish with our first roll, of course, was a natural 20 on a skill check. So I'm gonna finish providing some perhaps game-changing information to our inconspicuous lizard folk, and let her know what she's seeing. But we'll stop right after that to kind of give you a chance to make some introductions, both of yourself and also for your character, and kind of get a feel for where they might be in the this protest that's unfolding. But yeah, back to you real quick. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I should just chime in real quick. For those watching, the video chat stuff is gonna be a little bit wonky for the rest of the session. Because I don't have an easy way to switch from 4 people to 5 people yet. But by next week it'll all be sorted. So just bear with us for a little bit longer, and it'll be a lot easier next week.
Yeah, a lot of things are getting hammered out, so to speak. And it's a good thing that we have a gnome with a very big hammer. So, yes, Ness, you are definitely uncomfortable with big stinky crowds of mostly humans, but just, city folk who carry a just rather unpleasant series of smells, unique collection of things that encompass all walks of city life. But as you start to move through the crowd, and for you, it's a little bit less difficult than for our rather endearing brother and sister who are trying to push their way back out of the crowd at the moment. As much as you were maybe trying to kind of lay a little bit low in some ways, your 7-foot frame is parting the crowd as you move forward.
I need it known that I do not have rats along my back. We have to establish this because you mentioned my 7-foot frame.
Yeah. Oh God, yeah. No, don't worry. Well, I'm sure we'll have some other encounter call-outs here. Yeah. So you kind of move around the edges of the crowd, and trying to really get as closer look on who may be trying to also be inconspicuous, as you suspect your contact might be.
At least I have good angles, what with my height and all.
Yes. But it's not something that you see.
Must be nice.
Yeah, right.
This is why piggyback rides are happening. So Gorham
Shall
can
we
know
get
what
you
it
a box?
feels like to be tall.
I just made my servant boy carry a stool in case I needed to just stand up on it and view the crowd.
Right? Shall I get you a box, or would you like me to describe it to you?
Sheely, the one whose name I don't remember.
Oh, yes, got it. Okay. So yeah, you it's not something that you see. It's not something that that you hear being spoken. It's something that you smell that catches your attention.
Oh no.
No, it's this complex and rich bouquet of roses. You're not actually seeing roses, it's the scent of it. It's almost like someone has made a perfume of it. And along the edge of the crowd, you see a very well dressed, manicured man who you realize after a moment, although it's not quite obvious at first, is tiefling.
I'm sorry. Did you say cured man?
Yes, cured man.
That's my favorite method of preservation.
Like a man-sized piece of sausage or bacon.
I mean, some would probably describe him that way, yes.
Isn't that what all of you are?
Well,
excuse me, I would be a toddler-sized piece of cake.
well,
That's true. More like a turkey leg than the entire turkey, I suppose.
There we go. So, in this case, no, not so much for eating, more for someone who is kind of immaculately dressed, but not in very like a showy, ostentatious way. Just in very well tailored quality clothing, which really, like maybe not the first thing that you pick up on, but it's to the point that even you notice. And he's talking to a few other members of this growing crowd, and they seem to be just kind of sharing rumors and seem to be more watching the crowd than trying to get riled up and shouting, slinging protest slogans and or holding up crudely made signs. But as you're kind of getting a better glimpse of this person, not only do you see that it's subtle, but they're a tiefling. They also have in addition to that kind of a perfume, they also have this rose kind of on the lapel. It's something that would be easily, I think, for others overlooked, maybe as part of just the well-coiffed attire, but for you, it's it just kind of rings out as, oh, it's a rose. That must be the person I'm looking for. They also smell of roses. How I'm glad they made it so obvious. Okay. So I'm gonna leave you with that information and to kind of think about how you'd like to proceed. But
I know
I'm gonna.
I know
Oh, go
exactly
ahead.
how I want to proceed. Can I just? It's really quick. Can I just jump in and then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, displaying Ness's usual, usual for her, unusual for anyone else, um, combination of situational awareness and complete lack of tact. She figures that she shouldn't mention Milani outright, but she also doesn't see anything wrong with her chosen course of action of walking up right behind this tiefling, leaning over to look at the rose in his pocket and study it, and um, right in his ear, though not intentionally, say, "You smell sweet."
If possible, he has leapt higher than you stand. And for someone who was so well collected and kind of the center of a small group of attention, seems very startled as he turns and starts to just slowly crane his head upwards. And says, kind of swallows, says, well, thank you. And he kind of seems a little flustered, but he kind of straightens himself up a bit and goes, yes, it is a new cologne that I've acquired. In fact, if it interests you, I'd be happy to show you that and any of my other wares at my shop. I should reopen shortly.
Um, quick question: what's like? How late is it relative to sundown?
No, that's fair. It's early afternoon actually.
Oh, okay, no worries.
Uh, I would not have I have learned long ago not to. He's still craning upward. Um, not to make assumptions. I'm sure that I would be able to craft a number of garments to suit your needs, your impressive needs.
Only impress mammals. Yes, I will go with you. And then I just wait for him to leave.
Okay.
Just look at him
He says,
expectantly, like there's no point in staying at this protest. Now that I've found who I'm looking for.
fair enough. He says, well, if you would perhaps give me a few moments to take leave of my companions, you are welcome to follow me back to the shop. I'm sure that he's kind of been looking you up and down. And do you keep any noticeable signs of your service to Milani on yourself? I mean, we heard earlier about your impressive, essentially full plate of bone armor.
So there's no obvious signs, but when he suggests that he'll be a little bit longer, I take out a flask from my bags, and the flask has Milani's rose etched into it. So it would be kind of tricky to see because it's not painted in or anything. It would be tricky to see if you weren't close, but if you're close and you get a good look, you can see that it's a good, pretty reliable symbol. Excuse me.
Okay. Um,
And yeah, I'm drinking from the flask, of course.
so he had begun to turn and take his leave of his companions here, and you can kind of see his eyes catch for just the briefest of seconds and seem to hang on the flask. And if you weren't really paying attention, it happens so quickly that he just seamlessly goes back into talking to his friends and taking excuses. But he turns and says, actually, if it wouldn't be too much trouble, would you be willing to meet with me? Would you be willing to make a stop with me on my way to the shop? And there's a few things I need to pick up. I had almost forgotten. In fact, if you'd like to make yourself comfortable there, in case you prefer not to wait here at this tense crowd, I think you'd find yourself comfortable. Be able to, if you take a bit of a rest from your travels and have a little bit of respite from. He's kind of looking you up and down, like, well, I'm sure you can find something you'd like.
Being accustomed to traveling and very, very anxious about things going sideways, I'm going to rest a large, very sharp-clawed hand on this man's shoulder and say, "Wait together." And take another swig.
You could kind of, you could kind of see the kind of painful, squirming as he tries to just keep face and be like, that should be fine. That should be fine.
I should clarify here. Ness has no idea that she's scaring this guy. She knows that he's uncomfortable, but she doesn't have the self-awareness to attribute it to her. She's just like,
this is fun.
We'll figure it out together.
Okay. So we're taking a little bit of a step backwards here, everyone. I want us to dive back into moving around the scene, but I do want to take a moment to introduce our final cast member and also our final character for the evening. I'm really glad you could make it and join us, Julia. But I'm turning it over to you if you'd like to say a little bit about yourself. Dan, if you have anything you'd like to share about your character, especially things I think I really think Krista put it well earlier, like reputation. Like, what would people know about your character? And if there's anything else you feel would be really important to share up front, description, things like that.
Okay, yeah, sounds good. And you guys can hear me okay? Just want to make sure internet's all not funky. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, Julia, of course. I am relatively new to tabletop RPGs. I started about a year ago, so I'm still working my way through figuring out my footing, but happy to be here, having fun with a bunch of internet people. I'll be playing Kamina Windham. She is a human born in the city of Kintargo. She is approximately 6 feet tall, short, brown hair, green eyes, thin frame. She is the co-owner of Wyndham Apothecary in the town area of Villigry. So, based on that, she would be well known in that specific area of the town. And I'm not sure how much more I should go into.
Fair enough. So one of the things that I asked each of the other characters is we're currently at a gathering protest, a large one, the largest one so far, that is gathering in Aria Park outside of the revered opera house that the new, rather draconian Lord Mayor has decided to move into as opposed to a government home. It's a latest insult upon the many injuries that this man and his house has managed to inflict in little over a week upon the city. And people have become growingly agitated. You are also well aware of the events of the Night of Ashes, the number of cherished locations that burned to the ground, and an even larger number of people who have are now unaccounted for. So that's definitely on the hearts and minds of many of the people here. And I asked each of the characters what it is that has brought your character here today. You don't have to give away any trade secrets, so to speak, but like, why come here? What are you looking for? Or are you coming with someone? Or are you looking for someone or something? Are you just trying to stay informed, to take the temperature of what's going on? Have you come to just gawk and be amused? There's many reasons, but I'm just wondering what brings you here, and if there's anybody or anything in particular that you're looking for or coming with.
Yeah, so the main reason I am at the protest is I'm looking for somebody, a contact, someone I may know, may not know, but other than that, also wanting to stay informed.
Okay. Well, arriving here, you can see that, that you were aware of a few other protests, smaller ones that have popped up earlier in this week, but this is a much larger crowd with much more agitation. And you can you can feel the tension. People are shouting protest slogans. They are blazonly defying some of the edicts that have been issued recently, the proclamations that have outlawed certain things. They are also slowly being ringed in by the town guard, the Jatari, and you get the sense that it wouldn't take much to push things over the edge. But there are so many people here from so many different sides of the city, so many different stances on this recent turn of events. For there are many who support Chelish rule and House Thrune, and they are certainly counter protesters here within this crowd as well. But yes, you have arrived just in the crowd. How do you go about looking for this person?
I would probably be staying more out of the deeper throngs of the crowd. A quiet person doesn't like to be too involved in things, so trying to stay quiet on the outside and take a look at as many faces as I can see.
Okay. I'm going to kind of swing around to some of the others I've left off in a similar spot. But what I'll have you do when we come back is, music's great. But what I'll have you do when we come back around is make a check, and we'll see if you pick up any helpful details that might lead you to somebody that you know, or give you some clues to someone or something that could give you some information about it. Okay, let's swing back to Gorham, kind of keeping in the order of things. When we left off, you had been kind of scanning the crowd, taking the temperature of it, but also trying to look out for people trying to remain a little more inconspicuous, whether it's hoods up or keeping to edges, not being too involved. And honestly, it's not hard. It's not hard to see people doing just that. For as many people are arguing and bickering at each other, being one side of the protest or the other, for as many are holding up signs or cleverly entertaining slogans, or even a few daringly kind of displayed the portraits, the legally mandated portraits of Queen Abigail, who have defaced it. There are just as many people who are kind of trying to blend into the crowd. Some you recognize as other nobles who may be out for reasons of their own, curious about the crowd, or just wanting to gawk at things.
That was going to be my next question. Is amongst the people who are kind of hiding themselves, does any of the clothes seem fine or a little bit more upscale? Because even if you're trying, most nobles, it wouldn't occur to them to grab something that looked dirty and beat up when trying to hide in a crowd like this.
It would not occur.
Yeah.
You don't say. Yes, you do. You do see possibly as many as half a dozen other nobles floating around. Mostly, you notably absent are any leaders or very upstanding members of any of the houses. Mostly what you're seeing are the kids. So, you've seen one small group of three on the younger side who are probably just either here for mischief or hijinks, or just to see what's going on. One or two who seem to be trying to do a better job of blending in, and also have a few escorts of their own.
Mhm.
Which, if it wasn't, if the clothes weren't enough to make it stand out, certainly the escorts would,
Right.
because they are doing very diligent jobs of eyeing the crowd and trying to keep people at arm's length. And then, notably, you do see two members of oh my gosh, I've forgotten the name. It's hang on, Serini. I kept wanting to say I kept wanting to say the Zarni, but that's a very different family altogether in Pathfinder. Serini. So two members of House Serini that are slowly backing out of the middle of the crowd. And it seems that the sister's using the brother as a shield, basically, at this point. And it's rather entertaining.
Goran kind of tilts his head and goes, "That's interesting. I wouldn't expect any Sereni's to be here." And he hops off the stool and snaps at the servant, whatever his name is, to grab the stool and carry it off. And he goes, "Chile, we're gonna circle around and we're gonna run into those Sereni's as they exit the crowd. I'm curious to see why they're here."
Go ahead. Those were all very noticeable things. But if you want to give me a perception check, I may be able to tell you a few of the things you notice while you're at it.
I rolled a dirty 20.
Okay, that's still pretty good. Maybe not as game altering as meeting a potential contact way too early in the game, but
I don't have the same sense of smell. It's fine.
Yeah, enough for you to notice that looking for people who are trying to be conspicuous, you certainly notice the nobles, kind of one of the things you were looking for.
Mm-hmm.
But you do notice a few others, and some you recognize as people who are notable for supporting independence and maybe trying to stay close to the crowd, but not put themselves too far out online and possibly get picked up by the Tatari.
Mm-hmm.
But you do notice a number of people blended in almost like in pairs throughout the crowd that seem to be wearing pretty similar like hoods, cloaks, and you notice from kind of the way they move and these cloaks are fitting that they are they're armored. They don't seem to be getting in the middle of any arguments between different sides or shouting out any slogans. They just try to seem to be mingling and watching and quietly talking to each other.
Cowards hiding the fact that they're armored.
So as we're walking around the crowd to trying to run into the Serini children, I look over at Chile and mention, "There appears to be more people in the crowd armed than just the tautology group. We should probably be cautious."
If we were being cautious, we wouldn't be here, sir.
That doesn't sound right.
This is far more tense than the other protests this week. I worry that we may see an insurrection on our hands, and, well, one of those was enough for me, sir.
Don't let your stomach ache get in the way of a good time, Chile.
And he does seem to be kind of grumbling about it. Oh, yeah, no, I'm playing into this now. I'm sorry. We've made one too many jokes.
That's fair. I say this like patting him like on his upper thigh, right? Because he's like 6 foot tall. Right. And so I can't reach his shoulder. I can like kind of reach his hip.
You're just at ear level to hear this, like the grumbling in his stomach, just a complete unease.
Oh yeah.
Okay. So where are you headed, though?
So I wanted to. I saw the Serini kids trying to get out of the crowd, and I was on the edge of the crowd and wanted to walk around the edge of the crowd so that I would be there when they popped out.
Okay. Okay.
I mean, you are technically old enough, but you might have to be a midwife for that.
Oh, yeah. Well, listen, I'm much more worried about other things that might be popping off in this crowd. So, back to our noble siblings. You're making your way out of the crowd, and you can kind of hear your brother complaining a bit about, like, it's like easy on the shoving, sis. It's bad enough we had to buy new clothes. I'd rather not have them all stretched and torn before we even get a chance to break them in.
I'll stop and throw my hands up and go, "You do love to complain." And I'll cut back in front of him and be like, "Let me teach you how to part the seas." And I just start going, "Move!" I just straight up start pushing people.
And it there are a lot of disgruntled people in the crowd, but a couple things happen. One, you're a very charismatic person. So people do respond to your commands, partly just because when something is at imperiously enough, people will sometimes respond. But also partly because you were not quite as conspicuous as the two of you had hoped. And when people turn around to start complaining, or possibly worse, they realize who they're looking at, and will grumblingly part enough space for you to squeeze through at least. Some are begrudging about it, but they still do move. So it does make it a bit easier to get towards the outside of the crowd. And quickly enough to realize that, that the Datari actually really are trying to kind of create this semicircle around the crowd that to keep them from being able to storm the opera house should it erupt into some form of violence.
So they're not behind the crowd, but they're on the rest of the sides to keep it contained.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll say to Dylan as we're making our final stretch through the crowd, "I will not have us be herded like sheep. We need to get out of here before these guards are completely around everyone."
Fine, I'm sure we can create a large enough disturbance. It wouldn't be the first time we've made a scene, shall we say?
That's true, but I really don't want Mother hearing about us being here, remember? And I'll like reach back and like try to pull his hood back over our obnoxiously bright red hair.
He seems to chafe at it as though the idea of his glorious face and locks being covered is just depriving the world of true art.
It is.
And so he'll kind of like try to like pull the hood back just enough to have the locks pop out again on one side. Rolling his
I've done the same
eyes
thing. It's like right here, so I still have like wisps coming out because I like how it looks.
Exactly. Okay. But you're able to. Yeah. Subtlety? What is? Could you say that again? I didn't quite get it. But you are making quite a bit of progress towards the back of the crowd. You will notice that when you get back here, it seems to be a lot more onlookers, and the guards are further up. And at this point, I guess it would largely depend on how conspicuous on how conspicuous some of the people on the outside of the crowd are trying to be, whether you would notice them. I get the feeling that Ness is just going to probably stand out like a 7-foot lizard folk.
Everybody notices the dinosaur.
A 7-foot albino lizard folk.
It's true. That's very important.
Yes, I should get into women's medicine and develop a drinking problem. Halfway there. Ness is halfway there.
Yeah, I'm not going to follow on that one.
An albino wino gyno.
Yes, yeah, I know, I got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Oh God, kids. So you would definitely notice the dinosaur, who just seems to be towering over, and
I believe I recognize who they're standing next to.
You do. I was just going to say, and slightly imposing their space upon who you would know is the owner of a local tailor haberdashery, some of the finer clothing in town, the Devil's Threads, a place you've already mentioned, and have had a bit of recent history, I am led to understand. But certainly one of the few places in town where you'd be able to procure quality clothing that would meet the standards of the new proclamation for someone of your station.
Am I about to befriend somebody who strongly dislikes Darlin? Because that would be really funny.
See, there's some recent history. We'll put it that way, and we'll find out what that is, I'm sure, at some point soon. But in addition to this rather imposing lizard folk, there are a few other people out here on the edge of the crowd that you may notice, depending on how obvious they're trying to be. So I guess I should ask, Gorham, you've made your way to the outside. Are you trying to keep your presence from being seen, or are you just kind of standing right in the way?
So Gorham's maul, just for reference, is a little bit shorter than him. Imagine, how most knights who wield greatswords, right? If they stick the tip in the ground, right, the end of the sword comes right up near their chin. So
yes,
Gorham has the base of his hammer on the ground, right, with the top of the hammer up by his head, and there's just enough space for him to fold his hands on top of the hammer and then kind of put his head up on top of that, and is just standing there like that with Chili and the other servant standing slightly behind him and just looking into the crowd right as the Serenis come out, and is just like, has a big smile on his face because he knows they should not be here. Or at least he knows their mother wouldn't approve of them being here.
Just to clarify, please do not stick the point of your swords in the ground at home, kids. It's very bad for them. It dulls them right away.
Well, this is the end of a hammer, so it's okay.
It's fine.
Exactly. I just didn't want any of our impressionable viewers to get the wrong idea, okay?
Yeah, sword care, incredibly important.
When Darlin comes out of the crowd and sees this vision of Gorham, she kind of mutters to herself ugh, Alamaxa.
And he just looks up at her and goes, "Oh, hi, darling." And you her brother.
This horrible, shocked look of offense.
I told you need a stage name.
Yeah,
It just
absolutely. You need a
seems
stage name.
beneath
That's
me, though.
what makes her memorable.
Mhm.
Other Serini
Oh,
child.
yep. The stage name is what makes her memorable.
That's right.
You know.
Well, what a
Curious to see you
pleasure
two here.
running into you. Yes.
Yes, curious to see you two here. I wonder what Mommy Dearest thinks about it.
Well, doing our familial duties of staying in touch with all political activity, of course.
I mean, isn't this a little beneath you?
Most things aren't beneath me, as the fact that I'm only 3'2".
The
But
entire earth is beneath you, dear.
whatever makes you feel better. I was just curious what was going on with today's festivities, and I was delighted to find some of Thrun's greatest compatriots hanging out amongst the upset common folk. Are you siding in against Mommy Dearest? He says, kind of leaning forward a little bit, right?
I think it would serve you well to remember that titles are important and that Mommy Dearest is not her name, but Countess. And as pleasure as this has been, I actually have other business to attend to, so let's go. And I'll start turning back actually towards what is his name? Hematon? The owner
Oh,
of
yeah,
the
yeah.
restaurant.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. So,
Raises his hand and waves. Toodaloo, darling, and brother.
okay, just to
Who
clarify,
is
because
the
I may have
level-
had.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. Just to clarify, because I may have had it wrong earlier. What is your brother's name? The one that's with
Logan.
you? It is Logan. Okay. I thought I heard something different earlier, and I might have just been hearing something else.
So hang on, what?
Okay.
Just so I have it in my notes, what's the name of the owner of the Devil's Threads? Is that it?
It is. And you can tell that I was not prepared for your D20 because I do not have it open in front of me. So hang on while I grab it. Yo, you do?
Haste?
There we go.
Okay, can someone spell that for me?
Yes.
Hetamon. Last name Haace.
Hedamon Avocado. Got it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh god, please tell me you're gonna call him Avocado. He's gonna hate it.
I mean, not in character. I don't think Haas Avocados exists in this world, but
Okay.
As we're walking away, I say to Logan, like, I swear, every family that has a smaller property has less amount of class.
I
What does that
told
leave us with? 2 houses.
for now. And I'm not sure that you could call that class. I don't know why they adopted him in the first place.
They seem to have a thing for charity in that house. You know, like how
she says like it's a bad thing.
You know how like we give our servants like 1 day off a week.
Why do we
Sometimes.
do that? I'm sure they could use the money.
Yes. We do provide them with uniforms, no? It always looks a little dirty. Altamon!
um, so you can see that at the moment, squirming a little uncomfortably as this lizard folk has basically rested her hand rather firmly on his shoulder.
Not intentionally firmly, mind you. She's just buff.
So, okay, we He's basically trying to turn towards you, but it's a little awkward and hard to move at the moment, and so it's rather than what you would expect, slightly more graceful, well mannered turn. It's more of this like strained sideways kind of turn, and it's like, well, hello. I had not expected to see you here, darling.
Yes, I'm actually quite happy we ran into you because we were hoping to stop by your store, but it seems you're busy.
Oh, I'm still in the process of reopening it after that rather unfortunate event with the window. He kind of gives you this strange smile.
I passed by it the other day. It looked like just crack. Shouldn't stop you from business.
Well, cracks have a way of spreading, my dear. Is there some type of, or is there some service I can provide for you, or your noble house?
Well, it's one of the most recent proclamations. My family and I are in much need of new clothing. Embroidery now being a taxable choice. But will you be heading there soon?
Why, yes. In fact, I planned to head back after, well, these taking time to see the rousing events unfolding here. I am going to.
Will your large friend be joining us? And she kind of like slowly scans up.
I have invited her back to the store, yes. It seems that, it seems everyone has a need for good clothes these days. I must say, while the new proclamation should be good for business, I'm rather distressed by the rather tacky way that it has limited our attire options so well, grossly. I too shall miss the refinery that once colored the city.
I understand. I've had to break out basically all of my jewelry and fur-lined clothes. What else is left?
Oh, well, my dear, you're a rose without any of the accoutrement.
You're always such a way with words.
Ah,
I'm darling, by the way. And I like reach out a hand like this to Ness.
your brother's like, kind of like a little bit shaken, like slightly appalled.
I take the hand. Be careful that I don't inadvertently puncture her wrist with my claws and say, I'm Ness. Nice to meet you.
Yes, it is nice to meet me. Well, I look forward to seeing you at the store as well. Perhaps I could help pick something out for you.
Oh, this is fantastic. All right. I'm gonna jump over to Julie real quick and kind of see how her search through the crowd for missing companions has gone. If you want to go ahead and give me a perception check, we can see if I can give you some specific details, but I'll tell you some of what you're seeing either way.
Okay, quick question. How do I make a perception check on roll 20?
Yes. Okay, so it can be a learning curve for all of us getting used to it, including myself. But it's a pretty useful tool once we have it set up. So, do you have we had a chance to like put the character sheet together in Roll20 yet?
I just did that.
Okay.
I was muted, so I got that most of the way in there.
So, in theory, you should be able to go to the actual skill on the character sheet and be able to click that to have it do the roll for you. But it's also easy enough to just type
There
in
you
the
go.
command. Okay, there we go.
She got it.
Okay. So, yeah,
Ooh, it's a 19.
it's a good roll. It's a good roll. You are kind of making your way through mostly the outside of the crowd, trying to be careful to not get caught up in it, and also to not become too obvious yourself. You know well enough that if things turn badly out here, this is a very dangerous place to be. And you've had enough friends go missing recently that this would be an easy way to become one of them yourself. And it's tricky. There are quite a few people who are also trying to remain well hidden, and as a result, it's hard to make out faces or features that might give them away. But as you're going through, you do spot somebody kind of keeping, in some ways, to the shadows on the outside of the growing crowd, and hood up, staying quiet, seeming to also be looking around, trying to find someone or something themselves. And it's not long before you do recognize this as not only someone who you attended the school with, but also someone who was involved in, well, shall we call it some of the extracurricular activities that you found yourself involved in.
Yeah. As soon as I recognize him, I would make my way over.
Okay. Are you approaching them? Like, are you going to try to pull them aside out of the crowd, or are you trying to like come up and just like how subtle are you trying to be about it? I guess it's
Yeah, I think I'd, you know, that kind of way when you like stand by somebody, kind of like you're not trying to talk to them when you actually are, trying to
yes.
blend in.
Okay. So they're still kind of frantically looking around, and after a second, they realize that someone's kind of come up next to them, um, in a way that catches their attention, and they kind of carefully turn and look, and you can kind of see like a bit of the caution and tension just like fall away as they almost excitedly turn and go, Kamina, oh thank God, it's you. And
Have you heard from anybody?
no, not since the Night of Ashes. We had found ourselves a new gathering place. And I was late to meeting them. And the whole place was in flames. I didn't see a sign of anyone. I haven't seen any of the others. I haven't heard or seen from the professor. Have you?
No, nobody has come by since that night. I haven't heard from anyone.
I got desperate. I started dropping in on different hideaways, on people's lodges. Yesterday, I even broke into his office. I kept hoping I'd find some sign that somebody had made it out, or that some clues to where they're hiding it. The only thing I found was this letter from it seems like it was coded, but the language was, well, we've studied enough to be able to tell it wasn't just this friendly talk of visiting some local family, but it's from House Vitakora. The letter was from the son, who they're all gone too, either dead or missing. It makes me think there was more going on there, but it's the only clue I've had so far.
Who are you looking for here? Outside of... You seem more nervous than I was expecting.
Well, I had hoped to find anybody, but I'm also hoping to see somebody that might be from or related to the house, because I think the letter arrived after the Night of Ashes. I think one of them is still alive.
Why don't we stick together for now? And just keep an eye on things. See if we can't spot something together.
Can't tell you how much of a relief it is just to see somebody, anyone.
Likewise.
I can't believe how quickly so many people, so many places gone. I don't know how they knew so much.
That is one of the more disturbing parts of this.
I really thought we were going to be able to bring the Ravens back.
Yes.
So,
well. Go ahead.
oh, I was just saying, at this point, you can kind of hear the crowd pick up in intensity very quickly. And it's not long before you see the source of agitation, as on the grand balcony of the Opera House, overlooking the crowd, Barzillai Thrune himself has stepped forth.
Ba ba ba.
Ba ba ba. And well, the crowd is almost in an absolute uproar. You can hear shouting, demands being made. They're pressing against the guard, and there is a growing demand being made that that the proclamations be tossed out or that Thrune step down. But he quickly begins to try to call for the crowd's attention, and the Datari began kind of slamming down their weapons and crashing greaves together to try and create a very steady beat to try to get the attention of the crowd so that Barzillai can actually speak over it. And he certainly has no problem objecting. So let me pull this up real quick because he has a few things that he would like to say. Here we go. Okay. Oh, this is great. So what you see, I'm not sure if this will pull up well, but I'm just gonna
That's fine. Fireball. Just kidding.
That would be fantastic.
I didn't mean to press
that. Okay, so here's kind of what you're seeing. The protest has been going on for about 3 hours now. Thrune is, well, he is kind of an imposing man. He's covered in this ornate and embroidered red, orange, and black clothing with just a richly ornate breastplate that has the pentagram of Asmodeus in the center, as well as the cross of Chelia. He's got short, dark hair and...
Sounds like he was nice enough to put a target over his heart for us.
Right? And he's kind of just lightly tapping this really wicked-looking mace in his hands. And with his great condescending sneer, he basically gestures out amongst the crowd below as they quiets just enough for him to speak. Ah, my adoring little chickadees. I am sorry to say, I've not yet adapted to your quaint country ways, being accustomed as I am to sophistication and learning of Egorian. Nonetheless, know that I have heard your concerns, and that I appreciate valued feedback. And I know we shall eventually find a mutual understanding in the fullness of time. I take pride in updating Intargo's quaint, outdated laws to the modern standards the city deserves, and strengthening its ties with the Empire in these cruel times. But obviously I have approached my duties too aggressively. You say you chafe at the presence of non-natives in positions of power, that authorities not of the city have no place as leaders, that you will not be yoked by intruders. Your Lord Mayor hears you, and so it is with heavy heart that I issue this proclamation in response to your demands. All ships' captains are hereafter barred from leaving their vessels and setting foot on Cantargo dock or streets, under pain of, say, squassation. So, with that, an 8th proclamation has been issued. And for the first time, a payment or a punishment other than a fine or incarceration, something far more corporeal and painful and cruel, has been issued. And the crowd, rather expectantly, erupts in anger and frustration. And it's not long before number of objects are hurled at the balcony, including a pile of manure, which just so happens to splatter across his breastplate. And
Told you, target.
Oh no!
uh-huh. And he's gone from this cruel, mirthful, imperious demeanor to this angry, almost incredulous, just frustration, where he shouted out, "Enough of this! Knox, run them off, arrest them, kill them. I do not care which." And then he turns and storms off back into the opera house. And at this moment, a number of things happen. The guards start to act quickly, and they begin to press in upon the crowd in the front, which would have been enough to push the crowd perhaps backwards or cause a bit of conflict and fighting in the front. But at the same time, at least a dozen robed figures toward the back of the crowd rip off their cloaks and their hoods, and beneath you can see the armor and the armbands of what has recently become a notorious citizens brigade, a militia in many ways. The Chelish Citizens Militia. A group who were very devoted to the rule of Cheliax and to House Thrune. Fanatically so. And they quickly brandish weapons and basically box the crowd in from behind, pinching them between the Datari in the front and the side, as they begin to attack people turning to flee.
Gorum looks up at Chile and says, "I'm beginning to see what you meant by it was more cautious to stay home."
You don't say, my lord.
Sometimes you're right. As I get my hammer in more of a fighting stance, ready to crush some skulls if necessary to get out of here.
He reluctantly goes to pull his own weapon as he says, "Oh, I've got a bad feeling about this."
I know, I hear your stomach.
Okay. I do want to give everyone kind of a chance for some parting words or actions, but we are coming up on a good point to close our game out tonight, I think. And we'll pick it up with this rather dramatic confrontation, a riot in many ways that has erupted in Aria Park. We can pick up with it for our next session. But if anybody has anything they would like to part with in character, now's your chance.
Darlin will grab her brother's hand and say, I think now might be that time for the distraction you were talking about. And she starts to like conjure some magic in her hand.
Like, this is the last time I let you talk me into this.
Yep.
Ness removes her hand from
Been there the whole time.
from Hedamon's shoulder and like rolls her own shoulders and says, talk later. Innocence must be saved.
Oh gosh.
Will you save me?
Oh. Yeah. I know we kind of rushed through a lot of things with your scenes tonight, but is there anything that you would like to say or do in parting?
When this starts to happen, she puts a hand on her friend's shoulder, says, stay with me, and pulls out her blade and prepares to fight.
I'm so grateful you're here. I don't want to end up like the rest of them.
I won't let that happen.
Okay. Well,
Threw shit at him.
they literally.
At least it wasn't humanoid feces.
We don't know that.
It was manure, and humanoid feces look distinctly different.
Who says you
I
can't
don't know.
use humanoid feces as manure?
says the lizard folk.
Exactly.
Things Gorum doesn't want to think about. Part 2.
Also,
Part 1 is the fact that he looks like Dr. Eggman.
it's so true. That the MS Paint drawing you made. It's just perfect.
I can't wait to show all of the artwork and the icons, but that's fantastic.
I mean, it's up on Roll20 right now. You can take a look at it.
You put it as your character art?
No, they put it as my character art.
Perfect. Absolutely perfect.
I think
Shameless.
Darwin's new curse word is just Alamoxa. That's just gonna be their new curse word.
Yes. I mean, okay. In all fairness to Barzilai Thrune, there's no better descriptor of his actions tonight than he forked around and he found out.
Yes, well,
Technically, he had a mace, so he maced around and found out, but yeah.
we'll see exactly at what level Barzilai is playing soon, I'm sure. But for now,
He proclopped around and found out?
yeah.
I don't know what the verb of proclamation is. It's probably just proclaim. And
It's
proclaimed.
Yeah.
He proclaimed and found out.
No, he proclaimed around and found out. The around part's very important.
Incredibly important.
So, this has been fun. I'm glad that we were able to get together and make this happen tonight. I'm looking forward to being able to keep doing it. This is going to be a really fun game with some really great characters, and things are about to start happening that I think are going to bring a lot of deep backstory to light, and that's going to be a lot of fun to see. So I'm hoping that those of you that were able to tune in with us tonight will come back and check it out next Friday. We will try to get some regular starting times pinned down and share that with you. And but please come back, follow, the story's only going to get better. It's been a lot of fun, and I just can't wait to see what happens next.
Yeah. All right. Bye.
Good night, everyone.
Good night.